Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. It's really cold outside. So I used to work in magazines, and I did a lot of panels and events. This is my first time reading fiction in New York City, so it feels super vulnerable, but seeing all your faces is a beautiful thing. For me, all roads kind of lead back to my high school years for some reason. I have some obsessions about that. And when I heard the prompt was proof, I was thinking about the proof that we gather for ourselves about ourselves. So that's what this piece is about. In the time we were friends, Maura was obsessed with New York City, or at least her idea of it. That junior year at Eagleton Prep, she modeled herself after the girl on the cover of Sonic Youth's Goo, a page boy so sharp and lustrously black that it looked not quite dyed, but glazed with lacquer. The first time she took me for a ride in her Saturn, a Christmas gift she got from her dad, she turned to me with that hair and said, "Fuck it, Nia, let's just go." We were heading up Beach Boulevard, sunroof open, and while the faux fur of her leopard print jacket rippled in the wind, while my own braid slapped me across the face, that brutal helmet of hers barely moved. We missed the marquee for the movie theater, the strip mall with the Blockbuster video. "Mar," I said through chattering teeth, but she wouldn't answer. She climbed the on-ramp for I-95. And for several tense minutes, with the guitar screeching, with Mara's cigarette burning, with her fingers so lax on the steering wheel as we zoomed past the Jacksonville city limits, I thought she might actually do it, bust us all the way north to the Lower East Side. Then she swerved into an exit lane, and by the time I felt safe to open my eyes, we were parked outside of a Taco Bell. "You should have seen the look on your face," Maura said once we got on the line. I ordered nachos, not my usual, but I imagined the cheese gluing my guts back together. And when we sat down to eat, Maura was still on her roll, mocking my puckered expression, my grip on the armrest. Usually I was wary of feeling like anyone's joke because that's how other kids at Eagleton had treated me since I got in on financial aid, like a funny, fluky little laugh. Maura, though, was the real deal alternative, a self-selecting misfit. Of course, I had no clue who the fuck I was, as the one black girl in such a white place. Linking arms with Maura in the hallways, though, I learned to shoot off a look that screamed, "Thank God I don't have to be any of you." But I could sense deep down Maura could get as lonely as me, even those times when she acted batshit, especially those times when she acted batshit. She was a natural entertainer. She craved an audience. That day she nearly kidnapped me, I watched her squirt 5 packets of Fuego sauce on her bean burrito, then suck at the plastic where she ripped them open. "Show off," I said, rolling my eyes at her performance, but really I was awed by Maura's confidence, her sense of direction, that she knew where to go to find her tribe. That year I took the SAT and scored well enough that every few days I came home to find, stuffed in the mailbox, fat packets addressed to my full legal name. Colleges from all over the country blared their application deadlines in neon starbursts, Brown, Oberlin, that one school in Portland that didn't do grades. The day New York University finally showed up, my fingers trembled over the slick pamphlet outlining student housing options. "Live at the center of the excitement," it read. I saw the village, Maura and me, Andy Warhol and Basquiat. "What do you know about New York City?" my mother said. I'd made a point of dropping my interest casually while clearing our dinner dishes between sitcoms, but her skepticism bugged me. "Do you know how cold it gets up there?" "There's such a thing as a coat." I laughed. I was trying very hard to watch my tone. "Can I come visit?" my little brother whined, and though the look I shot Omari said, "That's out of the question," I silently thanked him for seeing it too. But my father, I knew, had the final word. He pushed his TV tray toward me and leaned back in his recliner. "Get that NYU money," he said, "then maybe we can talk." Sometime that year, Maura discovered the Taco Bell near Kona, the skate park across the St. Johns River. If we lingered there long enough, refilling our large sodas as an excuse to hold on to a table, the public school boys who skated next door would show up in a ravenous pack. Nails caked with grime, scraggly hair stuffed beneath pilling skull caps. Their black XXL t-shirts, dusted white where they'd skidded down the bowl, said Misfits, Fugazi, Circle Jerks. Boys like this didn't go to Eagleton. We'd only seen their kind in pictures and movies in the 1 a.m. hour on MTV. Our interest was anthropological. The most charismatic was a kid they called Monkey. We found out later his last name was Mancuso. Monkey would bring 10 Taco Supremes back to his table and fan them out like playing cards. He'd never wash his hands, but he'd slip off his scully before devouring the spread from end to end. His hair was a bleach blonde mop, dark at the roots. Eating tacos then, with the requisite head tilt, entailed much dramatic flicking of it. The day Monkey's troop took the table beside us, Mara, as if appealing to an actual primate, nudged a ball of napkins toward his knee. It was badly skinned, oozing open again. "Right on," he said, chewing and nodding. High as fuck, but I was too green to know that then. He took her napkins and pressed them against the wound. Then he turned to me. "Sup, Lisa Bonet," he said with a flick, 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 and I didn't know whether to be offended or charmed. But from then on, we always joined their table, and when Monkey got too antsy to sit still, when I felt the one other black kid in the place who worked there wiping down the tables, glaring over at us rowdy squatters, I'd whisper to Mara, "Let's go outside." In the back lot by the dumpster, she'd roll down all the windows of the Saturn and crank her stereo, and the two of us would perch on the hood and watch the boys jump their boards over the parking stops. "If you crash into my car, I'll fucking murder you," she'd yell, a queen to her subjects, and the boys thought she was one badass bitch. Sometimes Mara would sip from a flask they passed, but I stayed away from all that. I just knew my mama would sniff that out. All the cigarette smoke made me skittish enough, as did that other black kid who worked there. "My manager says y'all gotta go home," he would say when he came to take out the trash in his rubber apron and Taco Bell visor. And though he'd be shouting in the skaters' direction, shaking his head at their aggrieved yo-yo-yos, I remember the edges of my ears going hot, as if he were speaking directly to me. "Whose child is that in the car with y'all?" Mama asked me one Saturday night that year, when I tipped in the house on the edge of my curfew. Mama was always waiting up, peering out the blinds in her robe and her curlers, the Saturn's headlights catching her frown. "That's Mara's cousin," I said, because it was easier than trying to explain I'd made friends with a crazy white boy who called himself Monkey. "He's just in town for the weekend." I felt justified too as I lied my ass off because Mama had been the one to push private school in the first place. How could she complain about me cultivating friendships with the one girl I'd managed to bond with there? "I'm starting to think she can't handle it," I overheard her tell my father one night. "That white girl is fast. You hear what I'm saying? Got my baby smelling like cigarettes, and you should have seen this boy who climbed out the back. Looking like don't nobody love him." "All it took to get her in," Daddy said, "and now you want to pull her out?" "I'm not saying that, but I'm worried." "She's doing fine. Her grades are good. Let her live." "Maybe we should join a church," Mama said. "Make her go to an HBCU." "By the time she's college age, Camille, you can't make the girl do whatever you want." For a long time, my father was quiet, and I thought he'd dropped off to sleep. My heart, riled by this talk of my future, began to quiet too. Then Daddy said, "But I don't see what a campus visit could hurt," and I lay awake in bed the rest of the night. Even now, I tease my parents about that year and how they must have thought they were slick, how they suddenly discovered a recruiting event at Florida A&M University, the black state school. Daddy would stay home with my brother, they said, but at the start of May, Mama would drive me over to the Tallahassee campus so we could spend Scholars Weekend with other promising high schoolers and their parents. "And you'll get to stay in a dorm," Mama said, as if that was the most exciting thing. "But what is the point?" I asked them in a panic. "You know NYU is my #1 choice." "You need to explore all the scholarship options," Daddy said, "and A&M is a good place to start. You might as well. It's practically right next door." Exactly, I thought, but the fix was in. The appointed weekend, Mama dragged me to the welcome program 20 minutes early, then dithered for 10 over where we should sit. The auditorium was strewn with orange and green bunting, and from our vantage point at orchestra left, the FAMU logo, a rattler bearing its fangs, hissed at us sideways from everywhere. Parents strolled in smiling and nodding at each other as if they were privy to some secret intel, but a lot of us kids, I'd learn later, were petrified. How defiant I had felt that morning, choosing an outfit I'd wear on any other Saturday. My floral thrift store baby doll dress, my dusty oxblood Mary Janes. But glancing at the other juniors and seniors around me, these kids with whom I was meant to share an innate bond, I felt my shields beginning to falter. "Sit up," Mama fussed, and knocked my arms away from where I'd crossed them over my stomach. The program started, PowerPoints mapping out the campus, a panel of alums sharing their success stories, a highlight reel of the famous Marching 100 playing President Clinton's inaugural parade. Then the university's own president, a giant man with a graying afro and a booming voice, launched into a pitch that turned the place into church. "We say to Harvard, to Princeton, to that old Ivy League, no one will believe in Black scholars more than we do," he said, and somebody's mama yelped an amen. The audience laughed, and folks turned to see who the comedian was. And that's when I spotted him, sitting 2 rows in front of me, a boy who was eerily familiar. It took a second to register exactly who he was. The visor he wore on the job hid his hair, which I could see now was a small asymmetrical fade. But in that second, it took my 2 worlds to flicker, to superimpose. He spotted me too, that other Black kid from Saturday nights at the Taco Bell. What was I expecting him to do? Point me out as a fraud, a liar, a lost girl, an Oreo? I don't know. The fear and the shame I carried that year feels ludicrous to me, now that I understand every kid in that room was nervous and anxious to be accepted and testing our tribes. But what happened next in that auditorium allowed me to release, in one long and relieving whoosh, the breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That kid's face, Jeremy's face, cracked open into the warmest smile. It promised next year and the 4 after that. "Crazy," he mouthed, his eyes still smiling at me and at my mother who loved me, and my cheeks hurt for how hard I cheesed back at him. Thank you.